Go then. Hello and welcome to episode 9 of Conversations with My Father.
And father with his son.
And father with his son. Welcome back to another episode. This one is, as I'm sure you've probably seen in the title, all to do with IT, technology, invention and ingenuity. I think we like those two words.
I think we did.
And ultimately, talking about how the changes, or how many changes have occurred in my lifetime, kind of compared to yours. You've been through, when were you born? 1884?
1827.
1827, so you're getting on for nearly 200 actually. 200 is coming up, it's a good innings. So a lot's changed in Dad's time. Obviously a lot has changed in my time, but I want to take this kind of opportunity to find out more about what Dad's grown up with, good things, bad things, and how the world's kind of changed over the past 64 years.
Yes.
Nearly.
That'd be it.
So I kind of don't know where to start other than, well, first of all, a big thank you to everyone who is following us. If you're a new subscriber on YouTube, whether a new listener on Spotify, following us on Instagram, whatever it may be, big thank you. We hope we can entertain you and can continue to entertain you and educate you. I suppose there's a little bit of education in there.
Well, we'd feel humble if there was some.
True. And a big one we haven't mentioned, the obvious elephant in the room, is the fact that we're in a different location today.
Yes.
And we thought we'd stick to the fireplace vibe.
Environment.
And I suppose it's quite apt that we're talking about technology today and the fact that we have a fireplace on a TV today. So we've brought it to us here. So yeah, we're in my flat at the moment, up in London, and Dad's joined me for this episode up here, which is bloody lovely. Would you like to kick us off?
Yes.
Actually, I didn't say, while you're here, do you want to just point roughly in the bottom left? I'd say
down here?
Around about there. What are people doing around there?
They are clicking to subscribe.
Yeah, and how do they do that? If you're watching on YouTube,
Yes.
how do they do that then?
Absolutely no idea.
So, if you're watching on YouTube, you can hover the mouse above our little logo, which you should be seeing down there somewhere, the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Hover your mouse above the logo, click on the subscribe button. We really appreciate everyone who follows us and subscribes to the podcast. It helps the podcast grow, and we can continue to entertain you and educate you. And talking about that, education, I feel like you need to educate me on your childhood and what you've grown up with.
Well, I suppose the first time I was aware of technology was the calculator.
Okay. When was that invented, do you know?
Well, the electronic one, some of them were solar powered.
Yeah.
I suppose back in the early 70s they became quite commonplace.
Yeah.
And of course the enlightened school environment in which I found myself, they were okay that we had a calculator in lessons, but we absolutely could not use a calculator in exams for maths and physics and so on.
Some exams you could though. I remember when I was around.
Yeah, well that was progress. That was progress because they thought, the powers that be thought that if you relied upon calculators, we would not remember how to do straightforward addition, subtraction, multiplication and division.
That's true.
So we weren't allowed to use those at all. And I suppose the phones came slightly later.
Yeah.
I don't remember them at school actually. So late 70s, once we get into the early 80s there, when I was working, there were certainly mobile phones. I mean, the size of a brick. And you thought if you saw someone walking around the street with this huge mobile device.
Yeah.
They must be important.
Really?
Wow, they're away from their desk and they can still talk to their clients
Yeah.
using a mobile brick.
Because otherwise it would be cord and attached to a wall.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So when was the first mobile phone?
I don't know the answer to that
invented?
either, but they were coming in. Ericsson and Nokia were big makers of them. And I think they became much more commonplace in the mid-80s.
Okay. Because my first phone was a Sony Ericsson.
How very fortunate.
Yeah, and that was around the time. This was pre-Apple. So how much has changed since I first had my phone? I think you, Mum and yourself let me have a phone when I was 12 or 13.
Could be.
And I was still just at Homewood House.
Yeah.
Up to 13. So I think I maybe had it in my last year or penultimate year, just because it was then getting to a stage where it was nice to be able to communicate with you and let you know when we needed picking up or match days or whatever.
Yes.
But it was very simple in a sense that it was literally you'd text or call someone. There were no apps or anything like that. So it would have been the same for you when you first had your first. What was your first mobile phone?
I can't remember.
Yeah.
But it was pretty basic.
Yeah.
And if you put it in your pocket, you knew it was there.
Yeah. But as so many, I feel like we go in circles with, phones being small and then big and then small and then big.
Exactly.
Like now, some of the big iPhones. I mean, what I'm recording on now, it's not the big one, but it's still, it's in your pocket.
Yes.
It's there. Whereas my first phone was tiny. It was a Sony Ericsson. It was a small little thing, it was very, very, very basic. But I always used to love the Nokia. I can't remember what it was called, but it was known as kind of it was one of the first ever Nokias, and it would be a bit like we joke about punching in the numbers on the pad, and then it had one game on it which was Snake, which hopefully everyone should remember of my generation. Do you remember Snake?
Yes.
And you'd use there would be a rough kind of northeast, southwest on your keypad. So whatever those numbers were, 2, 4, 6, and 8.
Right.
I think I'm visualizing a keypad. So up, down, left, right. And that would be the game. Very simple. So how much has changed since then?
But I remember the great joy on the calculator in my early years, so I would have been early teens, was being able to type in some numbers, turn the calculator upside down, and you could see the word shell oil, and even better to a youngster like me, big boobs. And you passed them on to your friends you were sitting next to in the maths lesson, and pretty soon you'd be caught out.
Yeah.
What are you doing, Ray?
I don't think we ever did big boobs. We did boobies. That was our one that we spelt out.
Could be.
So whatever, because the 8 would be the B, wouldn't it?
Yes.
How do you say shell oil would be 5? What was E?
4.
4. Okay.
Oh no, sorry. The H was an E. Sorry.
No. 4. It would be.
The
a 4.
H was a 4.
Okay, and then LL would be 7, 7.
E was 3.
Okay.
LL 7, 7. That's right. 0, 1. What was L?
7.
7 again.
7. Yeah.
Excellent.
There you go. Great entertainment. So that would keep you entertained for 30 seconds or so.
Yes.
And then did you get into trouble?
I don't think so for that.
You weren't arrested at all? You
No.
had quite a few run-ins with the police.
Because we didn't have any internet or anything,
Yeah.
we got our news at school from the newspapers and magazines.
Yeah.
And one occasion, I think it was 1974, after the Football World Cup, and I picked up Private Eye, and I thought, well, this looks an interesting magazine. I haven't seen this before. And of course, those who are familiar with Private Eye will know that the first several pages are incredible investigative journalism.
Yeah.
And then the second half of the magazine is pure made-up farce, and it's very funny. Well, I didn't know that, and I sat down with Private Eye and started reading in the second half. And there was this appalling story about the Nigerian president meeting his World Cup soccer squad at the airport and driving off with them, and proceeding to shoot them all. And I thought, my God, that's an appalling story.
Yeah.
And I told someone, do you realise that the Nigerian soccer squad were all shot?
for not performing well.
For not performing well enough.
Oh, God.
And I said, where did you read that, Chris? And I said, well, Private Eye, I think was yes, well, just be a bit careful where you get your news stories from in that magazine, because it's not always the truth, and it's not meant to be.
So you were sold on that story?
Yes, absolutely I was.
But now, obviously, Private Eye magazines, again, that's an example. Magazines are almost becoming, well, they're still a thing, but they're not as big as they used to be. You know, when I was younger as well, I'd go to the shop, and picking up a magazine was quite a big thing. Having £1.50 or something for whatever it was, a auto car or some sort of car or boat magazine. You used to sometimes pick me up a boat one.
Motorbikes as well. You were
motorbikes, exactly. And it was a big thing, having a physical magazine.
Yeah.
But now you don't see, when you go into a shop at WH Smith or whatever, you very rarely see people hovering around the magazine section.
Yes.
I feel like books are still obviously a big thing, but again, with the likes of a Kindle or other brands are available, obviously.
Oh, I like a good magazine.
But I know you do, but you're very traditional. So it's just interesting seeing how that's changed over time. Everything is literally done on a phone or a laptop these days. And it's scary to think how much we rely on just that rectangle.
Yes.
So it's crazy. So coming on from that, I want to know when you first, do you remember your first computer, first desktop?
That will have been at work.
Okay.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And that was, you know, one got to know how to operate them. They were pretty straightforward and basic.
Yeah.
But you know, there were times when older colleagues just couldn't manage them at all.
Really?
Because you
Too
come
advanced?
yes.
Really?
You come in from home, sit at your desk, and instead of having one of those old telephones with a receiver and mouthpiece attached with a spirally cord to the main phone thingy, and the whole point of the office was that we had lots of lines coming in and going out.
Yeah.
And this poor old chap, he must have been in his late 70s, really didn't know how to operate this.
Yeah.
And I was sitting opposite him, and you could see the light on his phone, on the keyboard, flashing. And all you need to do to answer that is put down the switch and say hello. Poor chap. I said, Janssen, it's your phone's ringing. What? I said, your phone is ringing. Oh, really? Where? I said, well, it's that one that's flashing, your line. Yeah. Oh, that's for me, is it? I said, yes. And by the time he picked up the phone, hello? Hello? Chris, there's nobody there. I said, no, Janssen, it's moved on now to the next light that's flashing. Yeah. So if you do the same with that, you'll find out who's calling you. Yeah. Well, this one that's flashing? Yes. And by the time he got to that, it had moved on to another line. Yeah. So the caller had now been...
It's like a sketch, this.
Had now been waiting way beyond our target of efficiency.
Yeah.
So I thought, just one moment, Janssen, let me deal with it.
Yeah.
So I flicked the switch. Hello, Janssen's phone, sorry to keep you. Would you mind holding just a few moments and I'll put him on? And I managed to do that.
Yeah.
And at the end of the call, he said, I don't understand. All of these things you were telling me, they weren't happening properly.
Yeah. It is tricky, but it's tricky. It's like that phrase, you can't teach an old dog new tricks.
No.
And it is a prime example. I mean, dare I say you've fallen into the trap of that before as well.
How dare you?
With technology. I think you've got to a stage where you have just accepted, well not accepted, but you've reached your limit of intellect and how much you want to take your technological education, let's say.
Yes.
And I feel you're very happy with where you're at.
I think I am, yes.
And you don't want to go on anymore.
I don't see that there's a great need for it.
Okay, but I do, definitely. I think definitely when I have kids, I want to make sure I am up to date. Not too up to date, because I don't want you to have your own TikTok account doing dances in a mirror. I mean, by all means you can if you like, but be quite popular. But there's a time and place. Like, I remember very similar to to what you just explained there. That story was when I first FaceTimed it might have been Grandma. I have a feeling it was Grandma, and I tried FaceTime calling her. Do you understand what FaceTime is?
Yes.
Okay, good. It's a video call.
Yes.
And she picked up the call, which was impressive in itself, picked up the call, but held it to her face,
yes.
or to her ear, sorry. And so all I was seeing was Grandma's ear here. And if Grandma's watching and it wasn't you, I'm sorry, but my memory's suggesting it was. And I was saying, Grandma, hold the phone away from your face. And she was like, well, I won't be able to hear you. And I was like, no, hold it away from your face. I FaceTime called you. And then suddenly she was there, and she was like, oh my God, I don't think she'd ever seen or realised that you could see someone visually through a call.
No.
And that was very entertaining. So bless her. And she's at that point where she'll having a mobile phone is a big thing for her. So
yes.
That's her generation. Whereas your generation, you understand mobile phones, laptops, and so on. But these sorts of things, if I said to you, Dad, I want you to record this episode, set everything up, upload it to YouTube,
yes,
it would be way too much for you.
It would be a complete waste of time.
We wouldn't have a YouTube account or an Instagram account. We'd probably have an Instagram account, but it would be pictures of you on the 9:46 train to Charing Cross, and you just updated people with a selfie.
Late. I never got into work at that time. I don't know what he's talking about.
I was looking on your Instagram the other day, and how you post probably once every 6 months.
Yeah.
And it will then, the comment will be, here, I haven't posted in a while. Here's a picture of me on a train. And it's like, that angle looks like, have you ever seen Ricky Gervais's bath pics?
No.
Have you ever seen those?
No.
He does those angles from down beneath. They're not flattering angles, as Mum would say. So yeah, I think we'd be lost without me, without blowing smoke up my own arse.
Yes.
I feel that's. But I've grown up with that sort of thing, and I've tried to educate myself, and it's easier, I think, being around it with my generation. So
it's been a shortcoming in my parenting skills. And
do you want to log on? I feel like we need to.
And
fire's changed. There we go. Back on.
I have now completely forgotten what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry. A
What day is
shortcoming
it?
in my parenting skills.
Yeah.
That you have received no guidance about social media from your parents.
No, but I don't think you could comment on it, because I don't think it was really a thing. Instagram, so for example, I would, when I think of social media, I think of Instagram. It's kind of my go-to.
Right.
Whereas I think would you think Facebook first thing? I don't know, when you think social media? No. What do you think of?
Emails.
Emails. It's true. We'll come on to that in a second, so I want to note that down before, because that's quite funny.
I'd probably go for Instagram, yes.
Yeah, you would. So I've lost my train of thought now. It's social media, so you didn't know how to educate us because it wasn't really a thing.
Not a big thing.
You wouldn't really educate us on, well, you've told me how to write an email, I'd like to think. You've told me how to sign off an email. I've probably forgotten how to do so. What's formal, what's informal, and so on.
Are you asking me that now? Or?
No, we don't need to know that. But that can save that for another time. But when it comes to educating us, I don't feel you've been in a good position to do so because you haven't continued your education on technology to be able to pass that over to us. I feel like you just hit a T-junction and you just were like, that's it, that's me done.
Working with people who did know how to do a spreadsheet and send messages and so on. Yeah. It didn't worry me that I didn't know how to do it. I drive a car. Yeah. I can't tell you how it works. Okay. Particularly.
You know, roughly.
Roughly I do, yes, but I wouldn't be able to service it myself.
No, true, but okay, I know what you mean. So you understand certain things, but then you also, and I'm certainly not a what do you got, a whiz kid? Should we call it that? Do you know what that means?
Just someone who's good with technology. As long as it doesn't have sexual connotations.
I don't think it does.
Well, it doesn't to me. But
good. I'm not great, but I kind of get by, and I know what I know and try and be as good as I can with what I know. But I never enjoyed IT as it was a class at school.
Yes,
didn't enjoy it. I was just crap at it. I didn't enjoy learning all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I mean, whereas Poppy's incredible when it comes to organising and spreadsheets and everything. She's great. Yes. So she's very, very organised. Emails. I wanted to come back to this, hence I'm pleased I wrote it down, otherwise I'd have forgotten. Yes. So when I message Dad, so I will send Dad a WhatsApp message. You know what a WhatsApp is?
Yes. Good. Of course I know what a WhatsApp is. What do you take me for?
But you very rarely, if Dad does message me back on WhatsApp, it's beautifully displayed, paragraphed out.
Yes.
It won't ever be just a chunk of writing.
No. It
will be beautifully as if you're writing a letter.
Yes.
And it will often be, "Dear Freddie."
Yes.
Rather than if we were to have a conversation now that I ask you a question, you wouldn't reply with, "Dear Freddie, here are my thoughts." You'd just reply back. No. So WhatsApp is far more back and forth.
Immediate.
Whereas emails, because you have grown up with emails, is a bit of you send a message and there's a bit of a delay between that message being read and another one coming back to you.
Yes.
Maybe a few hours sometimes, who knows. But therefore, I understand the dear and yours sincerely or whatever. Yeah. There's a bit of a gap. But WhatsApp is far more instant, so it's back and forth. It's like a game of tennis, bang, bang, bang. And therefore, you don't need to be as formal on WhatsApp.
Yes.
So either Dad does that, or I'll send him a WhatsApp and he'll email me back. That's what you do.
No, I
you
will
do. You'll send me an email on my Gmail account as well, which is one I don't really use that much. So with your thoughts or whatever it may be.
Yes.
Rather than just replying to the message on WhatsApp.
Well, I'm replying to you.
You are, to be fair. Maybe I shouldn't be as harsh because I do get a message back, which is nice, rather than being blank.
So too.
But it's a bit like me. You know, when you write a letter to someone, and then they would write a letter back. That would be a nice way of doing it, back and forth. Yes. It's the same platform on which you've communicated.
Yes.
Rather than if you were to write a letter and then get an email back, it would be the same sort of thing. It's just a different. You should use the same platform to reply.
In one of the standards that I was told at work in the early days, never type a thank you letter.
I do agree with that. I like writing a thank you letter.
And certainly never send an email thank you.
Yeah.
But I'm afraid that's all by the by now.
So that was, I'm pleased you said that, because that comes on to how technology is useful, but also potentially ruining traditions.
Yes.
Because, as Dad just hinted at, you love to write a letter, don't you? If someone's going through a tough time or needs a bit of emotional support, you would never WhatsApp them, would you?
Probably not.
You would spend time. You'd sit down at your desk, have a nice pen and paper, and you would compose a very heartfelt letter.
Yes. Because
Which
it's something you can keep.
Yeah, this is very true, and I really like that as a tradition that I do think is a dying art.
Yes,
isn't it?
And it is an art, actually, writing letters.
Yeah.
But it's, I don't know how, I just get told that I'm old-fashioned and get off my bike.
Get off your bike.
But there's a very interesting grammatical puzzle. And the same words, but with different punctuation, mean completely opposite things.
Right.
And the phrase is, woman without her man is nothing.
Okay.
So, woman, comma,
yeah,
without her man, comma,
is nothing.
Is nothing.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's really blowing the trumpet for the man.
Okay, yes. Yeah, yeah.
Change the punctuation in a tiny, tiny way. And you've got woman, comma, without her, comma, man is nothing.
Ah, yeah.
And it's completely
that.
turned it on its head.
Yeah, very good.
Just for the use of a comma here and there. But it's a good way of pointing out how important grammar is, and especially punctuation.
Yeah.
You know, Nick, dear friend Nick, and I have a thing going about apostrophes.
That's something I struggle with a lot. Carry on,
Yes, it's not difficult.
No, it's not. But from an early age, I think it took a while.
Yeah, I may have done.
What do you do with Nick?
Oh, we buy each other books which talk about it, and he sends me copies of a letter he's written to the Times, and so on and so forth. And it's just lovely to have
old man traditional things to do. Those sort of things.
Sorry, Nick, but how dare you?
Sounds great. Sounds very entertaining. But I like that because you have drilled that into me from a very young age. I think is getting how important grammar is and those sort of little things. What was the thing I used? Oh, me and I.
Yes.
So that was a big one you used to pick me up on.
Yes.
So for me and my sister, I can say it that way. But if Phoebe and me went to the shops, that would be wrong because me doesn't go to the shops. Phoebe and I go to the shops.
Yes.
But me and Phoebe go to the shops. I'm just saying this.
No,
is just,
Phoebe and I go to the shops.
But yes, sorry, very
because
true.
Because if you leave out
there as well.
the person or people who are causing the duplication, then you go back to the singular.
Yeah.
And I went to the shops.
Yes. Okay.
Then you go add Phoebe in. Phoebe
That's
and
it.
I went to the shop.
Anyway, that's by the by. It's not really to do with technology, though, is it?
No, it isn't.
No, I've gone off on a tangent there.
I'm going to come up with what I consider a very funny story.
Here we go. Right. Strap in.
This one was at work.
Which one? We talk Car Shepherds Crossway?
Yes.
Okay.
And we had to write notes about all our clients so that if I was out of the office and that client rang, then whoever amongst my colleagues who picked up the phone would be able to read my observations and be able to advise the client accordingly.
Yeah.
Well, we filled out all these forms and sent them out to clients for them to check through. And what we didn't appreciate was that some of the fields that you filled in, they allowed you to keep typing, but they'd only take up to 100 characters. So my intention was to write, Alan is overweight in drinks stocks.
Okay.
Because he'd had his company taken over by Diageo or somebody. And so that was just a little note to put in there. I didn't know that everything I typed after that just disappeared. So what appeared to the client, and his wife rang me up about this, it said, Alan is overweight.
And he was a client of yours?
Yes. And he was. But that had nothing to do with my investment strategy.
Just
so the wife rang me up and said, thank you, Chris, for sending us these things. For what reason have you put down that my dear husband is overweight? And I thought to myself, I didn't. And then it came to me very quickly what had gone wrong, and it was a computer problem.
Right.
But
God, mortified. Like getting an email from someone who he will have respected you big time.
Exactly.
Who's dealing with some
Why
big
on
investments.
Earth did he suggest that I was overweight? What's
Did
that
Alan
got to do with it?
Did Alan remain as a client?
Yes.
Or was he?
Yes, my explanation was accepted.
Oh, good. That's very good. So you basically, so the technology failed you on that in that instance.
It did.
Yeah, not good.
Well, the technology is only as good as the person who's operating.
This is true. Useless. Yeah. Surely but you'd have read it. You'd have read back the email before sending it.
No. This was all centrally done.
Oh right. Okay.
By the tech team, I suppose.
Okay. Yeah.
And then another really lovely and memorable moment with technology was my uncle Kenneth was doing the eulogy for my uncle David, who had recently died. And so he was in the crematorium with his hand on the coffin, and he was clearly upset. And the whole of the crematorium was silent, listening to him, what he had to say. And then his mobile phone went off in his pocket, and he was completely confused. He didn't know what to do. He didn't realize it was his phone to start with, so he carried on talking, and he just forgot about his phone.
Was it a good ringtone?
Yeah, well, it wasn't inappropriate.
No.
He then realized that it was his phone. He pulled it out of his pocket and simply said, "Go away," and then put it back in his pocket. And clearly he'd pressed a button on the front of his phone.
Yeah.
And the ring stopped. So he thought he'd solved the problem.
Oh, shit.
Everybody else realized he hadn't. So he, a minute or so later, the phone started ringing again, and he was, poor man, he was very discombobulated.
Yeah.
And at this point, the vicar got up from where he was sitting,
position,
and took the phone and said, "I'll deal with this, Kenneth."
Yeah.
And he did deal with it.
He did.
But the whole
Stamped on it.
The whole of the congregation were rocking in the aisles with mirth.
Yeah.
Poor man, he was so embarrassed.
It's not usually an emotion you'd have at a funeral.
No.
Would you?
No.
Poor Kenneth.
And then I've got a couple more things.
You're just rattling them off, aren't you?
Have you got any more?
Oh, you've asked me a question. What would you like to know?
How you have felt
Yeah.
the impact of technological advance
Yeah.
in the quality of your life?
Big one. Big one. Well, I mean, I would say the biggest thing that suddenly springs to mind is the how unsociable and impresent, is that the right phrase? It makes you in a social gathering. Is that the right phrase?
Impresent.
Impresent, not present.
Yes, not present.
Just not present.
Yes.
Get my grammar wrong. And how I do not like you look at any big gathering, whether it be a football match, Glastonbury, these huge events where there are more than 100 people, let's say, there to watch something. How many people have their phones up and are recording rather than being there and being present and just remembering it, seeing it through their eyes rather than through a lens, or literally through a screen that's then looking onto the thing that they're looking at. And how many times you walk onto a train or public transport and people will not talk to each other.
No.
They're just glued to their phones, head down, bang. And I'm guilty of it, you're guilty of it. We have become, without a doubt, a very emotionally unintelligent in certain situation kind of society, I suppose.
Yeah, well, that's very interesting that you're noticing that.
And also how sometimes I catch up with mates and as I said, I do have we use social media. We are right now using social media to portray us, our podcast, and we're putting it out there so that people can listen and go on their phones and listen or watch us. And it's great. It's a great way of building a platform and a profile.
Yeah.
But it does mean more screen time, more time just to yourself on your phone rather than being actually present.
Yeah.
So there are obviously huge benefits to that, but also when someone asks you a question on the tube or on a train or on a bus, you're a bit like, well, that's a bit weird. Why is he asking me a question? Or why is he talking to me? Because that's now abnormal. Whereas 30 years ago, when you were my age, getting on a bit of public transport, I'm sure you'd have just sat there and communicated normally.
Yes.
And that would have been, people wouldn't have had phones to look at or distractions. So I think that's probably been the biggest thing I've noticed growing up with technology is how, and even more so, anyone who's watching this and is of a younger generation, let's say, I don't know, 17, 18 below, who spends life on TikTok and YouTube and Instagram and whatever, how I feel that generation, if they're not careful, they could fall into the trap of almost losing communicative skills in the flesh, in the present.
Yes, yeah.
Because a lot of it's like, oh, have you seen this? Look at this video I did, or rather than it just simply sitting down and like we're doing right now, yes, we're filming it and so on, and we're recording it, but we are present with each other right now.
Yeah.
And I love that, and I think that's so important. And it's a big reason why I wanted to do this podcast, is to just have more time with you present, rather than it be texting or calling or whatever.
Yeah. Indeed.
So I think that's been a real big thing for me, and I can't wait. I'm going away skiing next week, and I know that's going to be a week where I'll take photos and videos and so on, but I'll be pretty much off my phone.
Yes.
And just using it for those reasons. I'm not going to be up. I don't want to be spending too much time on Instagram or talking to clients or whatever. I want to have those 4 or 5 days as just time with those people, relaxing.
Yes, doing it properly.
Exactly.
Living for the moment.
Yeah. So I think hopefully that's answered your question.
It has, thank you, yes.
But it's I do, so where I was going with that is I hope, the younger generations don't fall into the slump of relying upon technology as their way of communicating. If that makes sense.
Yes. I mean, it can be the part of their communication.
Of course it can. Of course it can.
Skill sets.
Yeah, but in going round to someone's house for dinner and just being like, phones down.
Yes.
I want to communicate with the people I'm with right now.
Yeah, exactly.
rather than taking a picture or videoing the moment, and being, being just being present. And I remember this, and how when I went to China in 2008, if you remember, on a social economics trip, which was unbelievable. And the Chinese are way ahead when it comes to technology. They are leaps and bounds. They're 5-10 years ahead of us, with all the advances and so on. And mobile phones out there were more impressive. Laptops, computers, you name it, tablets on the walls. Everything was really incredible. What I was seeing then is now almost becoming a thing in the UK now. And it's almost, I remember walking into an expo and seeing a tablet on a wall that would control the lighting, the heat, everything in that room, which is now, even you see that in a house now and you'd be like, oh, that's quite cool, that's quite present, that's quite a current thing. But back then it was an alien thing. I was like, wow, this is crazy. But where I'm going with this is I remember going and sitting down for dinner in a Chinese restaurant, and we were sitting there, us lot, just chatting away. There were 10 of us on a table. I remember looking over to another table of roughly 10 people, and every single one of them was just heads down on their phone, all sitting around the same table. They were all present physically, but actually being present with themselves wasn't a thing, unless they were all on the same video call. I just found I find that bizarre, especially when you go out for dinner. You're like, it should be a thing. It should be a really special occasion where you just enjoy it. You take everything in, atmosphere, ambiance, whatever. So Anyway, I've gone off on a tangent there.
It's a very good one.
Good. What's been? Well, I'll fire it back at you then. What's been the biggest thing, or looking back on the past, let's say, 45 years from you being 15, 16, coming into the age where maybe technology was becoming more of a thing in your life? What has been the biggest change or impact that's had on your life?
I suppose that social media, although I don't use it very much, is omnipresent and used and understood by so many people.
Yeah.
And I've made a list, actually, of top of which is the internet, but in no particular order. Other things which I consider could be viewed as one of the greatest inventions of mankind. And it's food for thought, and if anyone wants to send us some messages with either agreement with some of these or suggesting new ideas, that would be great.
Disagreement, maybe.
So, is the internet one of the top 10 human inventions of all time? How would you consider any of the following? The wheel, the internal combustion engine, television, combine harvester, steel, tarmac, radar, railways, big boobs. Oh, sorry, that was from earlier on. I'm sorry. Forget big boobs. That was nothing to do with it.
Top 10 invention, that.
But I think one has to experience an awful lot of change to put things in perspective of what has really made a huge difference to mankind. And I think it's...
Okay, let me fire that back at you. Let's go top 5.
Yes.
Out of those 10 that you've just said.
Yeah.
What would you... Oh no, let's whittle it down. Top 3. What would be
Top 3
your
from that
most
list?
important inventions? That's roughly in the past 200 years. The wheel. When was the wheel invented?
Oh, a long time ago.
1800?
The Romans had chariots.
No, sorry, no. 1800. God, yeah, exactly. Pre-Romans.
Yes.
So we're talking maybe 2,500 years ago?
Yes. I would say so.
The Flintstones. There you go.
Yes.
They.
Yes, they had wheels of a sort.
Okay.
Steel, I think.
Top 3 steel.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Tarmac.
Yeah. Me being a car man, I'd probably say tarmac, combustion engine, and wheel.
Yes.
It's the most important 3. I have to put the internet up there.
Yes.
Has to be.
I think I probably should do.
Has to be. I mean, it is. Right now, people are on the internet watching this, listening in, tuning in. That is, that's huge. I mean, that's a big one for debate. Maybe we should do a poll of what we put it out to. I'll try and do that maybe for my technological savviness. If
Wizardry.
I can do that. Yeah.
How many have I got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
8.
Whatever.
Yeah. Okay.
9 if you include big boobs.
Big boobs as a invention.
Is there any technology which you've found completely useless?
God. For me, something I've never used would be. You probably counter this by saying you don't read, but a Kindle.
Yes.
I know I don't read much, and I should read more. But I feel a Kindle is, well, there are other things. I'm sure there are other brands available, but that I understand it. I understand why it was invented, to make reading simpler, and you just need that little thing you can slip in your pocket or your bag, whatever.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm not a fan of it. I like, as on the rare occasion I go and buy myself a book. Just it's nice having it, and I think you're probably the same.
Absolutely.
God, I can't. I'm sure there are plenty. I can't think of something straight off the bat. What have you got one?
I'm glad you asked me that.
Oh, good of you.
Because I do have one.
I feel like it was
decidedly, and by some margin, the most useless piece of technology that I have ever come across was a lavatory in my.
I think I know where you're going with this.
In my office at Rathbones, and we'd moved into a building which was owned by the Japanese, and they thought it was a very good idea because they're quite keen on these things in Japan.
Yeah.
To put in a lavatory which had a number of features over and above what I felt was strictly necessary for a lavatory to provide. And you go into the cubicle and you have the lavatory sitting there, and you examine it slightly.
So that's
more
all
closely.
normal.
Yes.
Right, that's good to start. Yeah.
You then notice that there is an instruction pad on a special console down by your right hand.
Yeah.
And this affects the warmth of the water, the warmth of the hot air that comes up from somewhere deep in the lavatory.
Can you choose still or sparkling at all?
That wasn't available at that time, no.
Okay.
There were, if you lifted the lid, there were safety instructions in 5 different languages. 5 different languages. For a lavatory. I've never felt that a lavatory was a life-threatening device.
No.
But this one warned you of electric shock. What else? Minor burns to the buttocks.
Yeah.
And 1 or 2 other things. I thought, this is utterly ludicrous. Yeah. And I know that Rathbones loved its acronyms, which is where you make a word out of the first letter of the words that you're using. And I came up, this thing was called a washlet, which is a pathetic...
Washlet?
Washlet.
A washlet.
Yeah. It's a pathetic reflection on what this thing was capable of doing. This was top IT.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, right, what's going to do this justice? So I came up with automatic rinse sanitary earthenware with adjustable seat heating. And that came out as arse wash.
Arse wash.
Which was...
Say that again.
Automatic rinse sanitary earthenware with adjustable seat heating. So you could have the seat cold or hot. And that's where if you overdid it on the heat, you'd be in danger of burning your buttocks.
Yeah.
Then there was the wash facility.
Yeah.
And I couldn't work out how this operated, so I undertook an experiment.
Yeah.
And I could see that one of the safety precautions was that if the user of said sanitary earthenware got up halfway through the rinse cycle, it would shoot out and possibly risk drowning. So
the amount of water.
I kept my hand on the seat to maintain the contact that they wanted.
Yeah.
And pressed the rinse button.
Yeah.
And I was just amazed at how this little thing emerged from the back of the bowl.
Yeah.
And then began to point up, and it fired a not unpleasantly warm jet of water.
Yeah.
Which, to my amazement, went all the way down my suit trousers. And
wait, so you were up on your feet at this stage?
Yes.
Just I was purely inquisitive as to how
trying to work out how this all worked.
Right.
And then
before you'd gone to the loo.
Yeah, I didn't need to go to the loo. I just wanted to
check
research.
Right. Okay.
That's really about it.
Yeah. I've never understood them either. I like the phrase, what isn't broke, that's why I'm going to butcher it now.
If it ain't
broke, don't fix it.
Yes.
There you go, got it. And I've always thought, so Thomas Crapper invented the toilet roll.
He did in toilet.
Toilet roll.
Not the roll, was it?
Oh, just the toilet?
Yeah,
sorry.
I think so.
Invented the toilet, okay. But then there was Thomas Crapper loo paper. I mean, I don't know. Who invented
Thomas
the
Crapper,
loo paper?
I think, bought the rights to manufacturing lavatories in about 1900, 1901, I think.
And I'm assuming is that where having a crap comes from then?
Yes.
Yeah, there you go. So, wiping your arse is something that...
Sorry about that.
That is... But it is something that is... It works fine.
Yes.
So
and
why...
you'll have to check.
Yeah.
Because you can't be sure that the moderately comfortable hot water jet or the hot air has done what it purports to do. You cannot check.
This is it. So I would agree with you on that being a ridiculous invention. I've never experienced one before.
No, well,
so it's a Japanese toilet.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Well, I feel like I need to experience it.
Yes, it's worth
a say.
Everyone should give it a try once.
On that note, though, I have really enjoyed over my past 10, 15 years the development of the hand dryer as well.
Yes.
So many different ways of drying your hands now.
Yes, there are indeed.
Different machines that are involved. But Dyson have brought out the air blade, where you just put your hands in like that, and then you get air from both angles, which you put in for, I think it's about 10 seconds.
Yes.
And then you're meant to come out with perfectly dry hands, which it never works. No, unless I'm going it, but maybe I go in with 2 wet hands, but I just assume you rinse your hands, and then that's what everyone has, the same wetness of hand, and you go bang. And so those are, I'm okay with it, but I don't like the fact that it counts you down, and then you feel like if you spend another 10 seconds, someone's behind you wanting to use it, and you may be hogging it. Then there's the one, I think it's called the accelerator. Have you heard of this one?
Very much so, yes.
I think it should be called the conversation stopper, personally, because it is effing loud, that thing, and it almost blows such aggressive air onto your hands that
Skin wrinkles.
Skin, but you begin to think, fuck me, I'm getting really old. It's like, you chuck your head out of the side of a window in a car and your cheeks begin to go. It's similar sort of effect on your skin, and it's so aggressive that then the water shoots off your hands onto your trousers or your shoes, and then you have to spend the next portion of air that's coming out doing that weird shuffle under there, drying your trousers to make it look like you haven't wet yourself, and then maybe shoe up there as well.
And someone then comes
in. And then
in.
someone, you'll say, I promise I haven't wet myself. And they'll then probably experience the same thing.
Yes.
So I've always thought I liked the towel dispenser. I like that one.
Yes.
And when it comes around and it loops back around again, you just get given a set amount. But I always like to use that little bit more. Maybe I'm strange like that, but I'd like, one pull is not enough because I feel like there's a bit of wetness from someone else under there.
Yes.
And you're given maybe a, I don't know, 10 square inch piece of paper to deal with. So I don't know why just a standard dryer, why isn't that just stuck? It's just standard amount of air that comes out. I don't want the sort of one that's just like a baby blowing on your hands. I want something a little bit in between that and the accelerator is perfect.
Yes.
So those are
the most powerful accelerator I've ever come across was at Johannesburg Airport in the departures area.
Yeah.
God, that was powerful.
Well,
barely keep my hands underneath it. Hi, you've got a problem with that bit of kit? No, well, yes, actually, it's very powerful. Yeah, that's how we like it down here.
Yeah.
So, any more questions, or shall we call it a day?
No, I did want to just, there are a couple here, because it's such a good topic, this. I really like it. What do you think is to come? What do you think the future looks like for the next, let's say, 15 to 20 years? So let's go relatively big gap. So let's say when hopefully, what am I, 30, I'd like to have kids, roughly, probably will be watching, in the next 4 or 5 years maybe.
Yes.
So when my kids are of an age where they're beginning to come into technology.
Well, I think robotics is going to be an important area of development.
Yeah.
But then it's a question of what the human being does with all the extra time that they are saved by having a robot doing the simple things. I mean, you can consider a washing machine and a dishwasher.
Yeah.
Both of those machines were helping to do tasks which were normally done by hand.
True, very true.
And that's why I mentioned combine harvester.
Yeah. I did laugh, but
because
I
that
agree with
is,
it.
well, it's a very expensive bit of kit.
Yeah.
And it's only really good for enormous farms.
Yeah.
Which is Canada and US, possibly Australia.
Yeah.
And the UK, I think. But so I think robots. What else? I'm not sure.
Be interesting if robots, if we're at a stage where robots could even listen or watch what we're currently doing right now, and take on board information, and whether they, I don't know, it's a bizarre thought, but I feel like the robots, we've got to a stage where robots are beginning to appear in houses doing tasks.
Yeah, they can do.
Which is just, gives me shivers, that thought of
Yes.
that. Because then you see films like I, Robot or whatever, where they take, something goes wrong or malfunctions and it causes chaos.
Star Wars, there
you go, exactly. But yeah, I think that's that I suppose could well be the future. I'm intrigued by holograms as well. So for example, well, it's very true. I'm actually going to see them in a couple of weeks, which is the ABBA tribute, which is very exciting.
Yeah.
And I've heard from a lot of people
like to see that.
A lot of people I've heard say it is genuinely like they're there.
Yes.
Which is really cool if you're far enough back, let's say. but I feel, you know, there'll maybe in the next few years there may be a point where we can physically do a podcast by a hologram, and you be present in this room right now without you being physically here, and me the same with you.
Yes.
Because that is where I feel stuff is going, technology is going.
Yeah.
Which is strange, is bizarre. Or like even sit on a sofa watching the rugby, let's say, and it feels like it's in your room. Like you've got people like running past you, or you're far more in there. It's almost like 4D rather than, if you know what I mean. God, that would be crazy. But I feel there's, as long as we don't lose traditions and we make the right sort of calls with technology in the grand scheme of things, and we don't let ourselves get too caught up in robotics or it be all consuming, then we should be okay.
Got to strike the right mix.
Yeah, exactly. It's so true. So true. So I think that's probably a nice way of rounding it off.
Yes.
Unless you had quite a lot of things written down there.
Oh, I've gone through them all.
You've gone through them all.
Yes.
Good. Well, yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed this little natter about invention and ingenuity. What should people do now, Dad?
Click on that little
roundabout there somewhere.
Square thing down in the bottom right-hand corner.
Yeah.
So that will be an Instagram.
No, YouTube
connection.
Yeah.
And there will be Instagram. There are likes that you need to do with a heart.
Very true. Comments. We like comments.
We do like comments. And that's about it, really.
Sharing it as well.
Yeah, you can share it if you like.
You said last time word of mouth was always good as well, which is true. It is true, but we always like the technological sharing as well.
Well, I don't particularly, but you can.
It was nice to share it with others that way.
Absolutely.
You send it on to a friend and say you might like this.
Yes.
But we always appreciate your comments, your support. It means the world to us, and we hope you guys can continue to keep watching and listening and enjoying these episodes. It's crazy thinking we're nearly on the 10th one.
Yes.
Quite something. And also just a massive thank you really as well. We're nearly at 14,000 Instagram followers, and views are through the roof on certain reels and whatnot. So just it is incredible. We did not think we'd get this sort of traction at this early stage. We've only been going since mid-November.
Yeah.
So to think it's now coming to the end of February and we're that far in and we have that sort of following is just amazing. So thank you from both Dad and I.
Thank you.
No, thank you from Dad and me.
Yes.
That is right. There you go. Got it right at the end. Super. Well, that's episode 9. Over and out.
It is indeed. And then we go.
Well done. We go one of those. Bang into that. Bosh. There we go. Very good. Very good.